God bless everybody today. It's November 28th of 2023. Hopefully everybody had a safe and happy Thanksgiving holiday. Last time I did an update was probably over a week ago due to that, and so I wanted to get you guys caught up on what's going on out here. I think it's extremely important when we see these kind of natural occurrences out here. We've had another 5.3 earthquake affect both Turkey and Syria. I think this is extremely important. The location that it hit, I'm thinking also potentially could be an important aspect of this as we move forward. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. This hit in an area similar to the area that were hit by the two earthquakes earlier in the year in February, I believe. So you can see on this map, this is one of the Syrian live maps I use. Use these a lot because they give you base activity of what's going on out here. I've been talking about this area here for some time, that this would be the area where Turkey pools their forces. We potentially would see an invasion into Syria from this area and a potential counterattack by the Kurds, sort of how it happened in Alexander the Great's day. Now, whether this actually occurs this way, I don't know. I'm just looking at how history played out in the past and how that could affect us in the future. And a lot of times God plays out things just as it happened in the past. And so we need to look at these things, and it may or may not act exactly the same, but I believe it will be similar in the future as it was in the past. And so I bring these things to your attention. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, and so I don't know whether they're going to actually happen like this. But it gives you something to be aware of, and so you know what to look for. And in this case, with Turkey getting ready to go into Syria through an invasion down into Lebanon and to go down into Gaza and protect those Palestinian people that they've been talking about for some time, I think this is the method of madness that he's going to use, because it's the only one that makes any real sense, that he would come out of here down into Lebanon through this area that's being totally bombarded by the Assad forces at this very moment in time. And it could be just coincidence that this new earthquake hit just around this area here, and the older two earthquakes, the 7.7, 7.8 magnitude back in February, hit just north of that. But this is that area that I'm talking about where they would pool down in this area. I think he does this to potentially bring our attention to that area to see if something might be happening. And I've been talking about this being an invasion point for some time, and how they would come down into Lebanon through this way. It only makes sense. The Kurds are going to push back, Assad's going to push back on this, and we're potentially going to see another attack by the Kurds or Assad against this original invasion. This would be a future invasion that might be coming up in the near future, and so we need to watch that, because Turkey is going to get into this game. They're going to go down and protect those Palestinian people. And once this ceasefire ends, even though they might have expanded it for a couple days, we're going to see Israel go in and eliminate this Hamas threat. So this is not over. And if you listen to Israel, they're not done. And so this is going to keep moving forward. Now, if you go into the original two earthquakes, these were bad. This was back on February 6th. Look at what's happened in the Middle East since these two earthquakes happened. Turkey's starting to get into this game pretty heavily. I think these things preemptively show us where we need to be watching, and that this earthquake back in February, though, was extremely devastating. More than I think like 70,000 people were killed, and it displaced all kinds of people, and it was considered the worst earthquake in 20 years, and it was as strong as the earthquakes back in 1939. So that gives you some perspective on just how the magnitude and the devastation of these earthquakes were, and how many people it affected, and the time frame. So from February 6th we had those two, and now we just had another one in November here. And so I think it's extremely important that we watch this area and see it's affecting that area that I'm talked about down in here. So it always seems to be radiating from this area here in general. And so I just think it's extremely important that we watch this area as Turkey is getting ready to break out. He's just getting everything lined up. And there's an important story that just came out at the end of this video that I'm going to talk about that deals with Iran. So Erdogan's been on a fairly large tour to a number of different countries, the Middle East, Africa, Greece, different places, Azerbaijan, to shore up or determine how he stands in the international light. He is trying to be a humanitarian in this Gaza conflict with Israel, where he wants to protect the Gazan, and he's criticizing Israel harshly to the point where he is saying that he will potentially intervene. And I've been talking about this for some time, that there will be a point in time where Daniel 8 does matter. We will start to see them invade into Syria. That will affect the Kurds. The Kurds and Assad forces are going to be affected greatly, and that will then turn into a Daniel 8 effect as we move forward. Iran has to fall or be absorbed into the 10 nations before they attack Israel, and so it's extremely important that we understand this. But in this article, Erdogan's inner circle is orchestrating criticism in Israel's media for political gain. Erdogan's shadow takes on a global advocacy role for Hamas, because he's not necessarily a big fan of Hamas because they're Iranian backed, but he is concerned for the safety and well-being of the people in Gaza and the Palestinians there. So Turkey's been shipping a lot of humanitarian aid through Egypt. They've been in dialogue to try to get a ceasefire going because he doesn't want Israel attacking the Palestinian people. And so he's been on a world tour trying to figure out how to shore up his side, find out who his allies are, see who's willing to allow him to do this or who's not going to allow him to do this. And then we still have potentially him leaving the EU if he doesn't get his way here. And he's already starting to get locked out of certain things, like the fighter warplanes or jets from both Germany and USA. He's not going to get these things, and so he's assessing his situation. He's shoring up all of his military hardware and things for this invasion that's coming up, and so he's going through these processes to see exactly what's where he stands in the international community. Now, Erdogan's been expanding this Neo-Ottoman Empire for some time. He's down in Africa, he's in Azerbaijan, he's in Afghanistan, he's in Iraq, he's in Syria. And I think this is an extremely important article because this is down in Africa, and it indicates that Erdogan signs a motion to extend Turkish troop presence in Libya until 2026. And so this is extremely important because if you know anything about Libya, you will realize that this is part of the 10 nations of Ezekiel 38 and 39, because you have Put and Cush here. You have Libya and Sudan, which are basically surrounding Egypt, And so if you look at the map, when Turkey comes down from here into Lebanon, he'll go around Jerusalem into Israel, and then down into Gaza, and then down into Egypt. This is going to matter because he's got Egypt already surrounded. So Egypt's not in a very good position here as we move forward, because Libya and Sudan are both part of the 10 toes that are going to affect us. And so this is, a lot of people just think as the Middle East is going to be part of the beast kingdom, but it actually encompasses part of Greece. It actually encompasses part of Africa and a number of areas here other than just the Middle East. And so it's extremely important that we understand and watch these areas as they develop. And Turkey's been working extremely hard on building bases and stuff along this Mediterranean Sea in Libya, and he doesn't have a lot down here in the Red Sea, but he's also affecting Sudan also down here. And I think this is an extremely important article, as this really shows us the extent of the damage in Turkey's economy. So Turkey's central bank hikes interest rates by 500 basis points to 40%, well above expectations. This is huge. We raised 500 basis points in a year and a half to get to where we are now, which is 5.5. Okay, he does this in one sitting, in one time. It's incredible what he's done here. Can you imagine the pressure on this economy as he's now has a interest rate of 40%? And I believe back in November 3rd, they reported that Turkey's inflation was at 61%, which is actually down a little. It's moving back up again. But this is going to shut the whole economy down. And when you get into total destruction of economies, like we're seeing in Turkey, what do? You go to war to shore up your accounts and make sure that you can sustain that country over time as you absorb their resources, as you take them over. So it's extremely important. This is a huge move in Turkey central banks to hike interest rates by 500 points at one time, where we're concerned about our interest rates and stuff here, and we've not done this kind of a move in over a year and a half combined. This is extremely insane what he's done here, and this is really going to come back. Yeah, here it says right there, a whopping 61% in October. The lira is crashing. He's raised 500 basis points. If he's going to destroy his economy, because he's going to completely shut it down, and there's just not going to be any growth here at all, because no one can borrow at these rates as we move forward. And on this article, which happened on the 25th, today's the 28th, we're seeing an amplification of Turkey's attacks on the PKK, which are the Kurds in the Kurdistan regions of Iraq and Syria. And so they're hitting them extremely hard. I've been talking about how they're softening this up. They're building that 70-kilometer buffer zone between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq, and so that they can keep the Kurds from their border, so that they're not having any attacks like they did on October 1st, where we saw that bombing in Ankara, which then started a chain of events of Quran burnings and an amplification against the Kurds. He started his first phase. He's in the second phase. First phase was soft targets, individuals, things like that. Now he's actually hitting hard targets, installations, power grids, oil facilities, things like that. And so we've seen all these different airstrikes against the Kurdish groups. This is amplifying, and it is going to continue. And once he does an invasion, this is going to become a real problem. And he, like I say, on around October 5th, I believe, he finished his first phase and moves into the second and third phase against the Kurds in these areas. And so we need to watch that, because that's monumental to Daniel 8 and how it's going to affect the Kurds, how the Kurds will be forced, once Turkey invades, to align with Iran, and then Turkey would smash both these nations. That would then allow Iran to be absorbed into Ezekiel 38 and 39, because Daniel 8 would finish, and that would then take 10 nations towards Israel for an attack by those 10 nations, possibly by the end of this year. We'll see how that happens. I know this is a fairly quick time schedule that I'm put everything on, but I think things will move quickly as we move forward. We have a full moon, or we had a full moon last night. When you hit the 1st of December on my calendar, we're at 1400 days. To me, every time we hit 100 days closer to the Feast of Trumpets of 27, we're going to see amplifications and magnifications of events out here. And I think this is an extremely important article that came out on the 26th, that the international figures, or some international figures, are calling for a delisting of the PKK on the 45th anniversary of their foundation. This won't make Erdoğan very happy if they try to delist the PKK, Kurdish Workers' Party, as a non-terrorist organization, which Erdoğan has deemed that they are. And so I just don't think that'll go over very well. This will probably signal to Erdoğan who some of his friends are and who he should be watching. And so it's extremely important that we keep our eye on the Kurds. Now, this article came out on the 24th, and we've seen somewhat of a pause on the attacks on our bases, but we've had 73 attacks carried out on U.S. forces in just over a month here, and so this is extremely important. I don't necessarily think anyone's been killed, but there's been a lot of injured servicemen here, and so we need to keep an eye on that. This has taken a small pause in the last 4 days, which corresponds with the hostage release, which is interesting because that makes you think that, well, this is probably an Iranian problem that we're having over here, which we know it is. It's sort of being denied by the administration. They have done some retaliatory strikes. But when the whole place shuts down for 4 days and you don't see an attack here, and also Hezbollah has slowed down a little bit, while Gaza is going through this process of hostage release, sort of makes you feel like everything's connected to a certain degree out here. And so we should be watching all these things, because once this hostage release completes, we will probably see a new amplification in all these areas all at once. Now, I think this is sort of an interesting story. So Erdogan's going to use everything possible to blockade off Gaza so that we can't get our military ships in there, and we're not an effective force, because he's controlling Cyprus and the waters around Gaza and Lebanon. And so we need to watch things like this. And it may seem innocent at the time to a certain degree that you have 1,000 boats that are set to leave Turkey for Gaza as this freedom group that's coming, flotilla that's coming down. But it's sort of to disrupt this area down in this area and break this blockade that's happening down here. And so, and even tell you that approximately 1,000 boats will gather in Turkey on Wednesday before heading towards Gaza in an attempt to break the Israeli blockade and disrupt maritime trade coming into Israel during Hamas, war with Hamas, an apparent repeat of similar attempts from over a decade ago. So this isn't the first time this happened, but what this would do was it would then potentially shut off access for aid to Israel through the Mediterranean Sea, because no one can get through here. And so that would sort of shut us out of this picture quite a bit. And how bad would it look if we did something to these personal, craft over there? If something would happen, any kind of disaster, that would be a huge outcry in the international community, that, something bad had happened and that these people are being affected, and that would just then give Turkey more fuel to throw on the fire as he moves forward in stating that this is the reason that this ceasefire has to happen, and look at all these bad things that are happening over here, and it's because of Israel and the United States that this is occurring. Now, do realize that we are still seeing attacks on the northern part of Israel into Lebanon. Gallant's been up there trying to create a buffer zone against Hezbollah. Hezbollah's been pushing back some. This has slowed down in the last few days, which sort of gives you the feel that all these areas are connected. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran, all these areas, and the attacks over in the Middle East on our bases, all these areas have slowed down during the ceasefire. But as I've said, I think they'll amplify once the ceasefire is over, and all areas will then accelerate their attacks. But he's been hitting these areas pretty hard up here. This is the security defense minister, and so they've seen up to 100 Hezbollah members killed in this, and they've destroyed dozens of observation posts, weapon depots, and all kinds of different things. It says the combination of all these tactical achievements will translate into a different situation, which will later allow the return of residents of northern Israel under completely different conditions than when we started this campaign. So they're basically doing a similar thing on the northern front of Israel into Lebanon to basically buffer that zone so we don't have an attack into Israel like we did on the southern border on October 7th, when 1,200 people were killed, and they had all those hostages, 240 hostages, and all those tragic events happened on October 7th. And here's an article that addresses that. In this article, it indicates on a visit to northern front, Gallant, which is the defense minister, vows to push Hezbollah away from the border. They killed up to 100 terrorists, and so this is extremely important that we understand there's multiple fronts going on at this time, and you still have the Houthis in Yemen that are attacking ships and different things like that, and launching missiles against Israel also. And I believe that Erdogan will have to act soon, because Iran is getting the capacity to destroy this nation. And that's not something Erdogan wants to happen, since he wants to protect the Temple Mount. So this is extremely important. And the Temple Mount is a huge factor in tribulation and great tribulation as we move forward, because the third temple has to be rebuilt to get the prophecy to complete and have the Lord come back. So it's extremely important that we understand this. But Iran keeps unleashing or unveiling these new hypersonic missiles that are capable of beating Israel defenses or reaching Israel or reaching Jerusalem or whatever. And so it's extremely important that we see what Iran's doing. A lot of them funds that are getting shipped over there are building these types of weapons, and so this is a real problem as we move forward, because we're actually funding these types of things, which is just unthinkable, but that seems to be the method of madness, is that we are actually supplying weapons to both sides of the equation at this time. So we just need to watch these things. But yes, they now have a new missile. Supposedly it can beat Israel's defenses, and I think this will be another reason that we see Erdogan get into this game before long, because he is going to protect the nation of Israel to the point where he wants to protect the Temple Mount. So in this last article, I wanted to stress that I think this is an extremely important development that just happened, just within the last few hours. Iran's leader calls off a visit to Turkey. This meeting was supposed to happen on the 28th or today. It's not going to at the last minute. It's been called off. You have to realize that Iran has aligned with Russia and Assad, and not necessarily with Turkey here, because Turkey's not a big fan of any of these groups, okay? And he's going to eliminate this nation of Iran before this is done, and so it's extremely important that we watch how this develops. And in this breath, we're watching a breakdown between Turkey and Iran as he's calling up, or Iran's leader just didn't show up. He just basically did not show up, and this is now going to cause Erdogan a lot of angst. And so it was indicated that this president was going to be here on the 28th, and he just didn't show up. And so I think this is an extremely important development. It was heavily announced on state media and discussed through Turkish television as late as Monday, and then all of a sudden we had this breakdown, and it is not immediately clear whether the visit has been canceled or postponed, but this Iranian leader did not show, okay? And that says a lot, because for him not to show up and just leave and snub Erdogan is probably not going to make him extremely very happy. And so I think that's something that's going to play forward. You just had that earthquake. I believe this is going to be the entrance point for the invasion. I think the invasion is getting ready to build up as Erdogan shores up all his eggs in his basket. And so we're going to see what happens, because Erdogan's not going to sit this one out much longer. He's once this hostage release happens and is complete in the next few days, this is then going to open up fronts again through Israel into Hamas and Hezbollah. I believe that'll amplify actually through the Middle East, because once the pause is complete, then all areas will just amplify all at the same time, and this will shock not only the Middle East, potentially markets and other different things. We are moving into December 1st in my calendar, on my calendar, the paradigm that I've shown you, whether it's right or not, I still say the parable of the fig tree is right, regardless of the paradigm. And so we need to watch the fall feast of 27, and I always talk about October 2nd of 27, because that is the fall feast of 27, the Feast of Trumpets, which would be potentially the date of the seventh trumpet sounding and the Lord coming back. So we need to be aware of those dates, how the Lord is going to fulfill the fall feast when he comes back. And so we should look at the fall feast of 27 prior to that strong generational end of the Jews in May 14th of 2028. That would be the end of the 80th year or the fourscore generation. So we should be watching that generation. But I believe now that we have this breakdown of Iran, this is going to amplify and move Turkey forward. And we just had that earthquake, which to me indicates that potentially we're going to see an event in that very specific area, which would be that invasion of Turkey into Syria. That would then push the Kurds towards Erbil, Iraq, because they would fail in that original attack. Turkey will drive through Syria down in Lebanon, around Jerusalem into Gaza, and that will be a fairly quick move once he unleashes this nightmare onto the Middle East as we move forward. So I just wanted to bring all these articles to you, try to keep you updated as much as possible. I do believe that as we get into December, things are going to start changing radically, and I believe that pivotal point will be when these hostages are released to the point at the full extent that they're going to be released, and then Israel starts to re-engage all these areas, which is going to amplify not only attack on these areas, but a retaliatory attack on Israel as they're doing all these attack on these areas of Hamas, Hezbollah. They're hitting Damascus and Syria, and they're also having to deal with that Houthi problem down in the south. So God bless everybody. Find the open door, find Jesus. This will amplify. It's going to accelerate. You just need to understand it. This isn't over. This is just beginning. We're in the birth pains and sorrows. We're moving into tribulation soon, probably in the end of spring of this next year, as I indicate on the paradigm. So we need to watch all these things. But God bless you. Find the open door. Keep putting oil in your lamp. Do the things you need to do to protect your families as we move forward. Once this breaks, everything will hyperinflate, because oils will move back up because of the disruption of the Middle East and how that's going to affect the pipelines and the transportation of oil throughout the world, and the scarcity of it. A lot of people are actually hoarding fuels and oils and different things like that because of potential conflict as we move forward. So as that happens, that diminishes capacity on the market, and that will raise your prices. Right now Brent's sitting around 80, but OPEC's getting ready to have a meeting because they would rather be at around $100 a barrel. But if the Middle East breaks down, that would then throw you into triple digit 125, 150 or higher oil, which would then be hyperinflation in the world, talking about the third seal of Revelation. And so that's extremely important as we move forward. So God bless everybody. Have a great day.